All right, walking into the Hiwatt shop because Dave Friedman sent over this Hiwatt PA head, this old thing that he wants Steve to convert to a guitar circuit. So you can go in here and check it out before he does the work. Let's see what happens. Dun-dun-dun. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hi, Miko-chan. So nice to see you. What do we have here? Oh, look at that. Busy beavers in the shop. What's happening over here?
Oh, just doing a little cleanup on Steve Vai's 292 for his current tour. We're just kind of tweaking it a little bit, cleaning it up.
Oh, is that all? Just working on Steve Vai's amp, that's all.
Just, you know, checking the bias, trying out some new KT88s we just got to test.
Groovy. And also drinking some coffee.
Always.
Let's do it. So I'm here to check out this freakish Hiwatt that I've heard about. What's the mission, dude? What's going on? Is it?
So.
Oh, whoa. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, wait a minute. Guys. What the hell is this?
It's a PA 112, I think is the model number. 100 watt Hiwatt PA head, 4 EL34s. It's basically a DR103 power section with 6 channels, and it's really common if you could find one of these used. What people do is they just gut all the PA part and turn the main chassis part into a DR103.
Oh, okay.
And this belongs to Dave Friedman. When I went over to take his 50 watt 68 plexi back to him after the last show, I was on my way out and he says, "Hey, do you want to work on this?" And I went, "Okay, define work on this." And he's like, put your favorite DR103 circuit in it."
Oh, okay.
And
so that's the mission here?
And I said, "What's up with it now?" And he says, "Well, it's got the Canadian mod." And I go, "Okay. Now that's a first for me. I've never heard of the Canadian mod. The only Canadian mod I know of."
Oh, that's what's going on here.
Yeah, the only Canadian mod I've ever heard of is when the Canadian government mandated that 16 ohms wasn't allowed. So if you shipped an amp into the country as new to be sold at retail, it could only have a 4 and 8 ohm output. They couldn't have 16 ohms. Had to do with the output voltage potential that was there at the speaker jack, but it was lame and stupid, and eventually it got repealed. But that's not the Canadian mod, and I've never heard of the Canadian mod. There was an overdrive mod that this company in San Francisco that was making fraudulent Hiwatts in the early 80s, late 70s and early 80s were doing, that was horrible also. So I thought, well, maybe it's that.
Okay.
But I don't know. He just said, I said, "How is it?" And he says, "Well, it's got that Canadian mod, it's got the little," and he described it, and I went, "Okay, well, that sounds like the Bay Area bad overdrive mod."
Okay.
Which is kind of ratty. And he goes, "Yeah, it's kind of ratty."
So you've played this?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm like with stuff like this. I'm like an animal rescue. I can't let let an abused
animal rescue. Okay.
Yeah, I can't.
I'm sorry,
let
I
an
said that.
abused creature go back out in the world like that.
Right.
So.
Well, let's give it a listen here. All right, let's give this sucker a listen. What am I gonna hear?
Well, I don't remember where I had it set last, so let's just mess around with it.
Okay. It's like,
Well, so that's the Canadian channel, whatever the hell that means, and then this is the UK channel, whatever the hell that means, and when you're plugged into this jack, both the UK volume and the Canadian volume work together. So
for crying out sakes,
trying
man.
to like turn it up to get a little overdrive.
Well,
No, that's awful.
okay.
Let's push the power amp to get it. Maybe help me that.
Leave me alone. That hurts.
Ow.
So that's what it does
Yeah, that's what
in its current state.
Yeah.
And you kind of can't dial it out.
Well,
It's just varying levels of heinous. Okay, so it just seems like there's like no way to dial out the horrible in this.
I mean, okay, so here's cleaner
Okay, so
and
where's
louder.
cleaner?
Push the power amp.
A little louder.
See, that's heinous. If I try to get more overdrive out of it to give it a smoother sound.
You can't smooth it out. We already heard that. Oh my god.
Let's try it all the way.
Okay.
See, with the master volume down is heinous.
It's like.
I don't know, that's almost bearable. I don't know.
No, it's not. It's a Hiwatt ass tone.
I don't know. Well, maybe we should bring in another pair of ears.
Yeah. All right. I think it's horrible. You think it's horrible.
I think this is almost passable if you play it loud enough.
Well, how about that?
All right, so we have Nico-chan here.
All right, Nico-chan.
Now, Nico-chan has got especially sensitive ears
Hello, everybody.
and a great sense of tone. So let's see what Nico-chan thinks.
All right.
I'm gonna crank this a little bit. Hopefully that helps.
All right. Mighty E chord again. Here we go. Nico-chan, check this out.
That's a diarrhea sound.
High five, Nico-chan.
Yeah.
We share the same opinion.
Yeah, it's
So this needs some help, right, Nico-chan?
it's
Yes.
You've heard of
Need a big help on this sound.
you've heard of tonal nirvana. This is tonal diarrhea.
It is really diarrhea coming out of my ass, and I can't believe it. It's so bad.
Yeah, that's pretty rough.
Well, should we throw it up on the bench and take a look at it
Um,
before you get into it and do your magic?
I want to try two more things.
Okay.
I want to see if the power station helps it at all,
Ah,
and then I want to compare it to
a little bit of science.
the unknown good sounding amp.
Okay, science
So-
guy, let's do this.
So, go ahead.
Okay, so what are we listening to now? So now it's still
I've turned it up all the way.
okay.
I've maxed out the master volume. The settings are pretty much the same, although I turned the presence up a little bit to get. I don't know why I just did that. I just usually do, but and then do the power station out of.
Okay, Nico-chan, we're gonna listen to it.
All
E-chord
right.
time. Ready?
All right.
Here we go. Well.
That's better.
Yeah, it's a little. Well, it's compressed diarrhea now, which is probably preferable to.
Yeah. Now it's just channeled down the pipes.
Yeah.
A little bit better.
Well, when Dave said this thing was a little ratty sounding, I think he was being.
I think he was setting you up.
I
what
think
he
it's
was
no
doing.
total setup, absolutely. Okay, so if I turn the channel gain down, and then with the volume, and then we turn this up a little more, still with the power station on, try that.
Okay, ready, Nico-chan?
Yes.
Here we go. Okay.
That's
Actually, that's a
almost
little
usable.
better.
Better. Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Wow. That's actually interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
I didn't know that could happen.
Well, one good way to get bad high watt preamp distortion out of the way is to get the preamp gain down and turn the power amp all the way up so that power amp distortion predominates,
And it's kind of rounding things out.
and it rounds things out. Now, like I said, this has got a This has got a DR103 power section in it, which is good sounding. It's not the best iteration of it that I've heard, but
Okay.
the mission is to put what I consider the best iteration in it, and but that won't be the majority of the work that I'm going to do on this. The majority of the work is going to be the version that I think that whoever did this mod, the version of preamp they use, looks like late 70, early 80, which is the one that's it's noted for its harshness and blocking distortion because it doesn't have it doesn't have the grid stopper resistors on the grids of the input stages. So when you push them up, and on the input stage, so when you push them up, you hear that really gacked out, hideous fizz.
So this has been kind of nasty for quite a while.
Yeah.
Okay. So
So now compare that to this.
all right. So now we're going to listen to what's this model? The
This is the
04?
DR504.
So this is a DR504 in great shape,
Yeah.
and we're listening to this through the power station.
And this will be my normal settings. It's up there. That's while I'm all the way up, and I'm turning the power station off now. So let's hear that.
Okay, so this is DR504
Yeah, this is a 50 watt
non-power station, and
Yeah, this is a 1972. It's like
we played this amp on the show too, guys.
this is as far as I'm concerned the ideal
Okay.
amp configuration.
All right, E chord magic. Here we go. Ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, now I'm going to put the power station on it. Okay. See, there's no comparison there.
No.
Even with the presence turned all the way up on this, it's got the roundness and the thump on the bottom.
Yeah, and that really cacophonous top end raspy thing isn't present at all.
Right,
There's
right.
none of that.
Right. Now, the DR103 power amp has got that big hi-fi output transformer in it. It has more headroom and more dynamic range than the output transformer in this one. It's just a broader.
It's gonna be that.
It's got more bottom end and more brightness, and a lot of brightness compared to a typical like 100 watt Marshall output transformer. So the slightest uglies in the front end of it are going to be accentuated by the power amp section of this because of the output transformer.
All right. So
And-
would that happen even if we took the preamp section of this amp and just like somehow Frankenstein these together?
It will. Well, we're going to get rid of the real nasty stuff that's caused by blocking distortion. Yeah, blocking distortion is basically if you put so much signal voltage into the grids of the preamp tubes that they're driven right to the edge of cutoff. Now you could put enough voltage into the grid of a preamp tube to the point where it'll turn on, it'll bias itself positively enough to where it just goes to the point of turning the signal flow off entirely.
All right, so there she blow, and so what's going on in there?
There's a few things. The phase inverter has been messed with, but everything on this board is not going to be like a DR103 board because this was a PA head.
Okay.
So all the components were arranged so that, you see that there's 2 extra tube sockets in here. So that's 4 sockets for the preamp stages. That's 8 channels.
Whew.
So 1 triode per input channel.
Okay.
So each of those was treated identically. So there would have been 8 sets of components up to about here that were related to the preamp input stages, and then you've got the phase inverter over here,
That's beautiful.
which would normally be stock, but somebody messed around with it. They modified it. I think what they did was, if you look at the front panel, it had a master volume and presence here, but that was changed to mid and presence, and this is the master volume. So they moved everything over a notch to put
that beautiful Canadian
this
channel in there.
muckety muck. Okay, so coming off of the input jacks, there's the grid bias resistors going to ground, which is correct.
Okay.
But it on a typical, even a 2 input, but on a typical 4 input, there's the 68K grid stopper resistors that are in series with the input signal.
Okay.
And there's one for each jack, and there's 4 of them, so that when you're using the low jacks, you're going through 68K, and when you use the high jacks, they go in parallel, and you've got 33K. In either case, you've got a grid resistor in between the input jack and the grid, the input grid of each triode. This doesn't have that. That allows the grid to bias sort of unnaturally and overload the grid with incoming signal to the point where you get blocking distortion. And blocking distortion really is just the onset of cutoff. Now, when you drive a tube to cutoff, you put so much signal into it that it just stops amplifying.
And that's what we're hearing in that nasty,
that nasty
artifact
fizz
stuff.
is the onset of cutoff. And then in the next stage after that, the bright and normal volume controls normally have 470K resistors coming off of the wipers of the pot and then blending together to go into the next stage.
Okay.
This is wired like these are wired like a 1980 Hiwatt, which had a separate volume control and a separate triode for each volume control with no 470K. The leads, the wiper of each pot went directly to the grid of the subsequent stage. So the pot performed the grid bias function and the grid stopper function, but only when the volumes were down low. If you turned them all the way up, then there's no grid stopper in there, and it would start oscillating and pushing it close to cutoff again, and then you get more of that rattiness. So this has got 2 opportunities in each channel to get into that really ratty blocking distortion territory. And then I haven't really gotten into which version of DR103 the phase inverter is on here, but looking down here, I can see there's a 1 meg there, there's a 1 meg there, and I'm just guessing that this is a later phase inverter that's got a little bit higher gain, and we don't need higher gain. What we need is the ability to do a full right-hand sweep and get this nice
bring
round,
the
rich
power section
sound.
in. Yeah.
And the earlier version of the DR103 does that. I've got all the schematics that you see online everywhere. I've got all of the different variations of Hiwatt schematics here, but I also have a variation that isn't online or available anywhere. And this is a hand-drawn one I did in the 80s based on my favorite 50 that I had at that time.
Oh, wow.
And it is a little bit different than all the DR103s and all the DR504s on the schematics that you see online. Just slightly different. But it's got the grid stopper on the input. It's got the mixing network, which serves as grid stoppers to the next stage, and no bypass cap on the next input stage. And a couple other little tricks that I'm not going to reveal here right now. But
can we show this?
yeah. Let somebody that is like really curious is try to zoom in on it and figure it out, and they can have some fun with that. But that
Easter egg.
those circuits, it's not that those circuits aren't used anywhere. They're just not specifically used in that particular combination in a 504 or a 103.
Got it.
Although both the 103 and the 504s that I've had in the past were wired that way. So there's a period in there between 70 and 72 where they were wired this particular way, and that's not represented in most of the schematics you see online. Parts of the circuit are represented on the Michael Huss site, the Hiwatt.org site, where they have that big trove of Hiwatt schematics, but you have to go through every single one of them and get the schematic from this one version, this one model, or the preamp from this one and put them together. This is the only model, and that's true of the 50 that I have, that has this specific combination of the front end and the back end.
I see.
And the amount of feedback and so on and so forth. The other thing that we've got going here that's lots of fun is this really trick little voltage doubler circuit on the bias circuit. Now,
Do they have to make that? Like,
somebody made this board and probably sold it as an aftermarket bias modification kit for a Hiwatt. Now,
look at that. You just lay it on there.
Now, the general wisdom out there is that there isn't enough negative bias voltage on the grids of the power tubes to keep them under control for modern EL34s that can handle the voltage, and that's all bunk. I'm sorry to say, that's all bunk.
Okay.
The current EL34s that are produced by JJ and Mullard and
What's in here, by the way? I didn't even peek.
these are RFTs. These are old RFTs from the 90s, which are made in East Germany, which is the same company that made tubes for Siemens and Telefunken and a variety of other brands. All of these tubes can handle the plate voltage of a DR103. I don't care what anybody says.
Okay.
At the original preset, factory set bias setting from the factory that David Reeves originally designed it to do.
Okay.
The only reason people do stuff like this is because of misinformation about how much plate voltage you can put on the tubes and blah, 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 blah. The bottom line is that's coming out. It's going to go back to the stock, because all you do by putting a thing like that in there is allow yourself to cold bias the tubes, and then again it gets more fizzy.
Yeah.
And I played around with it a little bit when I first brought it over, and it was even more heinous than the little demo that we just did.
So you tweaked it a little.
I tweaked it a little bit to get it to run a little hotter, but it's like a 20-turn pot, and you have to, like, one turn equals like an eighth of a volt difference or something like that. So it was a real pain in the ass to deal with, and Dave told me to put it the way I thought it should be.
Yeah.
So that means that's coming out.
Great.
And the others, everything else about it, all the original wiring loom is there. It's beautiful. It hasn't been messed with. These are the things that are usually ruined when somebody does a repair. They undo the original looming and strapping.
It's just incredible.
The wrapping of the loom, and this has got all the original filter caps, by the way, and I tested them all.
Oh, okay.
And they're all good. They're all well within 20%, and this is an amp from like 1972, like I said, and because it's a PA amp, it probably sat in storage for a long time.
Sure.
But you can see that.
And sounding the way it does right now, I'm pretty damn sure Dave wasn't using it very often.
Let's just verify that on camera.
Uh-oh. Look at what's happening.
Because why the F not? You know what I mean?
It's filter cap verification time.
So I'm bringing out my trusty LCR meter.
Okay.
And we're only going to really concentrate on the power supply.
Sure.
The main power supply caps.
Sure.
Because those are the ones that are most likely to be damaged if they were. Although I put it on this, like I said, I tested them and I put it on the scope.
But we want to do it live.
We want to do it live. So this should get me, I'll do it right here. This will be a good ground point. Okay. So that is great. That's 220 mic. And then these are in series, so I have to connect this over here. 215 mic. All right. Let's have a look, shall we?
Peekaboo.
220 mic, 220 mic. So
Let me get in here and take a real gander at these.
see if you can get in close. But these two are the main filter supply caps
Yeah.
right here.
So those are the ones you were just taking the readings
Yeah.
off of. They look great.
And they're rated at 220 mics, and one of them is reading 223 and the other one is reading 215, which is like, these capacitors are rated at plus or minus 20% tolerance, and these are like well within 5%.
Yeah.
So none of them need to be replaced, and they're not gonna get replaced.
I don't know, Steve. You're
The
courting
only-
more controversy.
Well, okay, this is the capacitor that was replaced,
Okay.
and this is the
that the
preamp.
def cap?
This is the preamp decoupling stage. That's an aftermarket copy of the original, and this one is rated at 32 mics at 500 volts. "32 mics, right? What are we reading? 15. This is 50% off. Now let's try the other side. That's correct. That one's reading 34 mics. So one side of this relatively new capacitor that looks like it was changed in, I have to dig in there and see if I can see the date code. It doesn't look like it has one. But 34 mics on, this is rated at 32, and it's 34 on one side and 15 on the other side. So this cap is like within 5 years old.
Isn't that funny?
And so much for replacing those bad original factory caps for aftermarket replacements that are way out of bounds. And that's part of my beef with recapping amps that don't need to be recapped. And if you're gonna recap, number one, use good quality capacitors, and two, test them when you get them, because the tolerances of some of those are all over the place, especially if they're rebranded capacitors. And especially don't use Illinois capacitors. Those are like garbage can liners. All right, that pretty much covers it for now. This is going to be a fun little project, and it's going to sound good when we're done.
All right, so we'll come back later and check it out when you have finished
Yeah.
doing the do.
That's right.
Right. Okay, we're about to play this thing. You're wrapping it up. How'd it go?
Well,
A little
like
hectic.
like always, it's always a little bit more of a challenge than you imagine at first. Of course, it wasn't the stock amp, it wasn't a DR103, it was a PA amp. It already had some pretty heinous stuff done to it, and took a little bit more time than I expected to get all that sorted out so that I could end up with a basically clean, quiet job. And then there's a couple of complications, like it doesn't have 4 holes to make it a 4-holder. So I had to sort of compromise the input jack wiring to be able to accomplish mixing the channels together. And so it's no longer Canada and UK gain. It's normal channel, normal volume, bright channel volume, bright volume, just like a DR103, but it's configured like a 4-holder, but with only 2 jacks. And turns out that the previous person that worked on it, the era of this amp had the earlier phase inverter configuration, which if they'd have left it alone, it would have been a lot better. But they didn't, so I had to convert that part back to my favorite version of the phase inverter setup for that era.
Okay.
And then they had separate gain buffer stages for each channel volume, which is closer to like a 7980 DR103, which is where a lot of the blocking distortion comes from. And so I change that to the earlier version where they are resistively mixed and then go into a single triode stage. So the overall effect is that it has less gain, it's more rounder and more musical sounding, and when you crank it, you get predominantly more output stage saturation than preamp distortion, which is the way you want it. Preamp distortion in these things never sounds that good. So you want to stay out of that preamp overdrive territory, and then let the power amp open up as much as possible. So it's just shifting the job from the front end to the back end.
Okay.
And that's it.
So if we were to poke around in here really quick and you highlight the main areas of what you did,
yeah,
is that possible?
there would be. This is the phase inverter area here.
Okay.
And if you're a real DR103 freak and you compare this tag board to a DR103 tag board, you'll see that there's similar components in there, but they're in different positions. That's because it was originally a PA tag board.
Okay.
So that's the area where the phase inverter and the phase inverter cathode follower drive are. And then I went through and found some component values that weren't of the original ones, and I actually had a mustard cap to put in this first stage here, a .022, and I put it in. I tested it. By the way, all the parts I put in, even if they're vintage parts, like I had a couple of mustard caps, I tested those on my LCR tester first before putting them in. So I put them in, and as I was bolting the board back down, I cracked one of the mustard caps. So I had to replace it with an orange cap, orange drop. But the orange drops sound almost identical to the mustard caps. So no big loss there. It's just I wasn't able to preserve.
How loud did you curse when that happened?
I didn't really curse that loud. I was, whenever things like this, whenever you're working on them, you're always going to slip up a little bit and something's going to happen. So I was kind of prepared for that. Yeah. It actually went a little smoother than I thought it would. So once I fired it all up and everything came on and I went, oh, mission accomplished, then I felt pretty good. I was going to replace that voltage doubler bias circuit because it's a huge pain in the ass, but we got a little push for time, and I decided to wait on that until I talked to Dave anyway, because who knows, maybe he wants it adjustable.
Okay.
But I set it to the value, the factory stock value, which is about 35.
So then
33 to 35 milliamps, so that it would just get it out of the crossover region and have a nice spank to it.
So when you got done doing the lion's share of the work and you fired it up, how close was it sonically to what you wanted it to be before you kind of got in and did the fine tuning? Like, okay, now let me set the bias and really, do the special tweakage.
Oh, well, it's like it's recognizable again. I mean, that was the okay. First of all, it works. Second of all the tone controls work the way they're supposed to. I didn't want to have to go under the tag board and validate every single wire that was under there. I just wanted it to behave the way it's supposed to. So I used the scope and a square wave to verify that the tone controls are all working the way they're supposed to. The presence control is working the way it's supposed to. And that's what I really needed to see. So once I verified all that and then plugged in and it had the bow door to the back of the head wallop thing happening, I was just like, okay, all right, let's get out of here.
All right, well, I want to hear it. So I brought in my Les Paul again. Last time I played it, well, I'll just say it sucked.
All right, well, I've got the cabinet set up with, like we had last time, with the power station, so we can run it with and without the power station, and let's let her rip.
All right, so we got to run and get back to the studio and do a Malcontents episode.
That's right.
So the last time I heard this thing, it sounded like ass.
Right.
So what I'm sort of expecting to hear the last time I played a Hiwatt was on episode 13 of the Malcontents, and we were playing your DR504,
Correct.
the 50 watt, and
Correct.
I'm thinking about how the harmonics lined up
Right.
when I bang on a chord. So
That's
that's
right.
what I'm kind of wondering if I'm going to hear.
Okay.
Okay. So. Wow.
Okay. Now, what I'm hearing is, yes, you do hear the sort of the harmonic content of the DR504. And if you remember the time that we had the 504 and that other DR103 that I worked on for a friend of mine that I rebuilt, that one had that more upfront personality too. And that's purely a function of a bigger output transformer and higher plate voltage, more power tunes. So let's beat on it a little more. I'm going to pull out some of the mids and back off on the brilliant channel a little bit and just do the same thing again.
Okay. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that even when I'm hitting it like as inelegantly as I can't quite get it to do that heinous, ugly thing that it did before.
Right, now I've turned the master volume all the way up to try to get.
All right.
Yeah, and that's like literally the boat door to the back of the head vibe. But harmonically, it's in the right place now, and all that fizzy, splatty, blocking distortion crap is out of there now. So we can even turn the gains up a little higher on the inputs. And you know what I'm going to do? Shall I put the power station on so we can hear the front end harmonic distortion
Yeah,
more?
let's do that, and then we got a boogie.
All right.
All right, ready?
Yep.
All right. It sounds like rock and roll now.
Well, it's
Nico-chan might even approve.
it sounds like everything is in the right place. Now this is with the master volume all the way up, and I'm going to turn the normal channel down a little bit because we don't need that much bass kill power. And I'm going to add a little mid. And the reason I'm fishing around here is because the controls aren't in the normal order that they would be on a DR103. So,
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
Same thing.
So now you're hearing the output stage compressing,
Right.
and a little
Rounding
bit of output
stuff
transformer
off.
saturation.
Mm-hmm.
I switched from flat to warm on the power station that time, just to give us a little extra thump. And besides that, it's just got a lot more iron in the output transformer than the 50, so it won't saturate the same way. So no matter how loud you play it, it's still going to give you that backhand a little harder than the 504. But what I'm looking for is the richness and the roundness, the note decay, and the string attack not having that fizzy attack. And so I'd say that was a success.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Let's get out of here.
See. All right, this is a little addendum to the Hiwatt from Hell project after the last Malcontent show on this last Sunday. I said I was going to do a little tweak to the input stage to give it a little bit more input sensitivity, and having done that, this is where it went. Just got a little bit more harmonically rich sounding.